Unique New York.
Unique New York.
Ready?
Okay. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel Ray and today I have another diamond painting deep dives for you with our host, Mr. Ray. Say hi, Mr. Ray.
Hi everybody.
Welcome. If this is your first time checking out this series of videos, please check out the playlist that I'll have linked in the eye above so that you can see previous episodes and kind of get caught up on this timeline of what we're diving on, which is
UFO stuff.
UFOs, UFO history,
mythology,
people, organizations,
legends.
Yeah.
So many shadowy organizations.
So many. And we're going to really get into it and talk about it today. What are we focusing on?
Today we're gonna talk about the year that the actual UFO mythology and the UFO legends as we know them today really started to happen, like all of the key events that have led us to today.
Right.
And that is 1947.
All right, so shall we get into it?
We shall.
Before we start talking, though, I just wanted to tell people about this painting. This is the Cauldron of Myrrh by Diamond Art Club, and we are really close to finish this, the second to last row, and I am going to be using what I showed you yesterday on my channel, which is Pity Putty. Pity Putty. Yes, diamond painting with pitties, as in pit bulls. And I'm going to use the Sweet Fig flavor scent. What's the difference between it? You know?
I suppose you would eat it if
if
it was a flavour, you'd eat it.
Same. Please don't eat it. And then all of the other accessories that I'm using for this painting will be linked down below in the description box. So without further ado, take it away.
Yeah. So I suppose just first to explain a little thing that, like, when I started driving from my compound in rural Kerry to the diamond painting bunker that Rachel records in, I started last Monday the 16th, and when I arrived here for the recording, Rachel told me that I was already a week late.
Listen.
I mean, I've had missing time before, but that's quite a bit of missing time.
You're not going to blame this on a UFO encounter, are you?
I did see some unusual lights in the sky right before, and I didn't think much of it. And yeah, okay, all right. It's maybe it's something to do with the UFOs. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it isn't. It's probably UFO adjacent.
It
anyway,
is. It could be.
At the very least, like.
Possibly the reason why we didn't have an episode last week.
I'm gonna have to get onto some of my sources in the government and see what they can tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess 1947 is when, you know, the UFO mythology takes on the form that we recognize today.
Okay.
Because you remember we spoke about the Foo Fighters during World War II.
Yeah. And
how lots of pilots had seen these different orbs following them and interacting with them. Mm-hmm. And then we spoke about the ghost rockets in Scandinavia mainly in like 1946, and how at that time, even though there were like over 1,200 reports over a couple of months period, and there was reports of them landing and having crashed, mm-hmm. that they were still seen as something of earthly origin.
Right.
You know, like it's something that the Soviets are working on, you know, it's an undercover thing, you know?
It could be explained because of war.
Because of the war programs and the secrecy around them, you know? Mm-hmm. And I guess there's a lot to be said about how that secrecy, you know, like with the Manhattan Project, for instance, mm-hmm. you know, they had this model to create secret kind of, I think they call them special access programs now, but, you know, secret programs to develop these weapons in secret.
Yeah.
I just used the same word to try and explain the word.
Yeah, I know.
But you know what I mean? Like it's a model for them to use.
Right.
And I guess the model after World War II as well, particularly because you had the rise of kind of, popular media and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
The model is, if in doubt, keep it secret.
Oh, not pinky out.
If in doubt, pinky out. And keep it secret. Other things that were happening in 1947 then as well is an aircraft called the Bell X-1, which is a rocket-powered aircraft. Now, the Nazis had been working on rocket-powered aircraft as well, but I don't know how successful they were. And after World War II, in the States, projects like Operation Paperclip, they came into possession, or at least they managed to get a lot of engineers and a lot of scientists and stuff that were working on these programs. And eventually that leads to the development of NASA and the kind of attempts at the moon, Werner von Braun and stuff like that. Yeah. We could probably get into that later. But suffice to say that, there was publicized flights of this not secret, but there was publicized flights of this jet aircraft called the Bell X-1. And in 1947, it was in all the newspapers because it had broken a speed of 500 miles an hour in the air.
Oh, yeah, because of, at the time.
Yeah,
it was not normal.
Yeah, it was really, that's incredible speed in 1947,
Yeah.
And even the people that were working on the project said that they reckoned it would break the speed of sound within a year. Now, I believe it took another few years. That was the early 50s before they broke the speed of sound in it. But, it was a brave new world and all these technological advances,
Yeah, it must have been amazing to live through that time and see all of those, breaking the records like all the time, all these new creations. And
everything was new, and like the amazing amount of industrial capacity that they had built up during World War II really kind of got turned around, particularly in the States, because like Europe was quite literally rebuilding itself for the second time in 50 years or 40 years, know what I mean? Yeah, or less than that even, like. And it just literally from rubble, quite literally,
Yeah.
And in the States, they had all of this additional industrial capacity that they had stood up, and that got turned over to kind of consumer goods, So you get the first like affordable automobiles, and television sets, and wonders of the modern world. Like it was that kind of age.
Yeah.
Popular mechanics were doing articles about how, in 20 years' time, robots will be doing the dishes for you. And
we'll have jetpacks.
Where's
my jetpack?
Yeah, everyone will have a personal helicopter. It was just before that age, but it was that kind of age. It was industrialization meets technology, meets this kind of can-do attitude that the war gives you,
Right.
I'm probably being reductive, but you know what I mean. It was that kind of age. It was, amazing things were happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess our story really kind of begins in about halfway through 1947, when the number of UFO reports in the media starts to increase.
Okay.
Now, when we say the media, this is radio and television.
Okay.
And, it's radio and newspapers, predominantly.
Okay, yeah.
And I guess with the way technology worked at that time, all newspapers were local, really, because you had to physically deliver the news to someone.
Yeah.
And they would necessarily be locally based.
Okay. They weren't like online on your phone.
Yeah, it wasn't online. You couldn't get like your news from whatever source or,
Jeez Louise. Sorry.
So, on June the 2nd, 1947, reports started appearing in local newspapers. So in Delaware, a single UFO was seen over an Air Force base there. And it was reported that the Air Force was investigating. On June 12th in Visor, Idaho, there was another report describing these two strange, fast-moving objects in the sky, witnessed by several people.
Okay.
On June 21st, residents of Spokane, Washington, reported that 8 disc-shaped objects about the size of a house were flying around at about 600 miles per hour as far as they could estimate.
Whoa.
And then the objects stopped suddenly and fell to the ground like leaves from an autumn tree that's shedding, you know?
That's a first for me. I don't know if I've ever heard of any accounts like that before.
Wait,
where they're falling, like...
This is
other
actually
than this.
yeah. This is actually one of the points I was going to make. Is when you read all the reports, there's several reports, at least 2 I can remember immediately, like where they've described the objects as moving like that. You know, like the way a leaf would fall, or like rocking over and back as it descends.
The ones that I remember are mostly those like meow, like, or blinking out or something.
Yeah. The blinking out and. But anyway.
Anyway.
And then on June 23rd in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a railway engineer, he sees these 10 shiny objects, and they're flying around as well. And also he mentions that when they descended, they descended in a fluttering kind of shape as well, in a fluttering movement. Then on June 23rd, this pilot, Richard Rankin, he's flying a commercial airline. So there's him, there's the flight crew, there's co-pilots, there's a lot of witnesses to this one, you know?
Yeah.
And what they see are 10 shiny objects. When they're around about Bakersfield in California, they see these 10 shiny objects and they're flying north. Now, he estimated that they were flying at around about 300 to 600 miles an hour. Which at the time was incredibly fast as well for aircraft. Certainly the 600 miles an hour one. Now, the thing about this is that Richard Rankin, call him Dick Rankin, was actually a pilot. Stop it. He was a pilot with over 7,000 hours of flight experience, and it was a whole flight crew that reported seeing this, you know?
Yeah.
Like, he was incredibly well respected. And again, the objects are flying in, they're kind of shiny objects. They're flying in formation. There's a lot of them in formation, you know?
Okay.
I suppose another thing to point out as well is that this was really the age when commercial airlines took off, you know?
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of people that went to fight in World War II and were trained in aviation. And then they...
Right.
Yeah. And then they demobilized. So now suddenly you've got a huge population of people that can fly aircraft, you know, and that are trained in aviation.
Ooh.
And it's really one of the things that spurns on the kind of commercial, early nascent kind of commercial aviation situations. So what you've got as well is that you've got a lot more people in the sky. Like nowhere near what you have now with us, you know, the way things are now. But you have a lot more people in the sky, a lot more people that are used to being in the sky, you know, that have been in the Air Force, or maybe they were pilots in the Navy or whatever.
Yeah.
You know? So that's another thing. I guess that's June 23rd. And then on June 24th is the first big event in what later becomes called the saucer craze. And this is really, like I said, the first step on what makes 1947 such a kind of seminal year for UFOs.
Yeah.
And it is the experience of a guy called Kenneth Arnold. We spoke about Kenneth Arnold before.
Kenny.
Good old Kenny. Kenneth Arnold is a business owner. He's based in Boise, Idaho. And am I saying these names?
Yes, you are, actually.
You gave me a weird look when I said that.
No.
He's based in Boise, Idaho, and he has a business where he sells firefighting equipment.
Okay.
And to help him sell the firefighting equipment, because you know you have to approach firefighting departments, and there's an awful lot of traveling. He's mainly based in that whole area, like Idaho, Washington, Oregon, California.
And there is no Facebook Marketplace.
There's no Facebook Marketplace, you know, and you got to get in your Oldsmobile and drive across the state line, you know, and it's going to take you forever. So he buys an aircraft. I don't know if he was in in one of the armed forces, and that's where he learned how to fly. But I would imagine it was.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
So he buys an aircraft, and he's using this aircraft to kind of hop around that area.
Yeah.
So Washington, Oregon, California, Idaho, you know.
Yeah.
And he's selling firefighting equipment. So one day he is flying on the June 24th. He is flying out of, hang on, I'm going to check my notes.
The famous notes.
The famous notes. He's flying out of a place, I'm going to go with Chehalis, Washington, and he's going to Yakima, Washington.
Okay.
Those are the names that I am going with.
I'm not 100% sure.
He's flying out of this. Yeah, and about 6 months earlier on December the 10th, 1946, 6 aircraft had left a Marine base in California, and they were flying to Washington. And there was inclement weather. 4 of the aircraft turned back. 1 of them made it to Washington, and the other one they never saw it again.
Never heard from it again.
They had never heard from it again. It was a C-46 Marine transport, and there were 32 people missing on the flight. 29 Marines, 3 flight crew.
Yes.
And the U.S. Army had offered a reward of $5,000.
A reward?
Yeah, which I'd imagine in 1946 was
good money.
A substantial amount of money. Yeah. So while he's taking a flight, Kenneth Arnold decides, you know what, I'm going to take a detour over where they've indicated that the aircraft has gone down. I'll be up in the air. I'll see if I can see anything. Maybe I'll make myself $5,000.
Yeah.
You know? So he starts flying over, and as he's flying by Mount Rainier in Washington, he sees these 9 glowing objects, and they're traveling at what he estimates to be about 1,200 miles per hour.
Wow.
And he describes them as, like, there's drawings, there's literally drawings of it that he's done himself, you know, and there's photographs of him holding up a kind of picture of it. And what it looks like is a kind of boomerang shaped. And he says that there was 9 of these and that they were traveling along. And he said that hang on, I'm going to get the direct quote up here. Hang on now, my brilliant notes. This is terrible. Oh yeah, hang on. Their flight was like speedboats on rough water, or like a saucer if you skipped it across the water. And then that's where the term flying saucer comes from, is that quote from Arnold.
Yeah.
And I guess this is the...
Interesting.
Yeah, this is the beginning of of people identifying strange objects in the sky with flying saucers.
Yeah.
Is his quote there. So what happened with Arnold was that when he landed, he went to the offices of a newspaper called the East Oregonian. And he went into the offices and he just asked them, listen, are there any reports of them trying out any of these fancy experimental aircraft like the Bell X-1 or whatever in the area? And the guys in the newspaper said, no, there aren't. And then he told them his story. And that resulted in, on June 25th, in an article appearing in the newspaper. And the article just said, you know, pilot views strange objects in the sky.
It must have been a really different time, though. Why would he go to the newspaper? Why wouldn't he contact the police first or something?
I don't know.
It seems a bit sus.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, to be honest with you. It did seem a little bit strange, all right, that he went to the newspaper, but I think he just landed and just maybe... I mean, I picture it almost like the Wild West or something like that. Even though it's not 1947 in Oregon or whatever, like. But you know what I mean? I kind of pictured it like the Wild West, where you rock up into a town and you go to...
Maybe someone who's watching will be able to clarify for us.
I don't know. But either way, that's what happened, is that he went to this newspaper, the East Oregonian. They publish an article saying that he'd seen a UFO. And then, I guess, with all of the other background noise, of UFOs being seen and stuff like that. Everything just ramps up and goes into overdrive. There are a load more stuff appear in the newspaper, So like on June 28 at Lake Mead, this F-51 flight crew saw a formation of 6 circular crafts off their right wing. And the same kind of, they describe them as the same, they're moving in formation, they kind of, like skipping. Yeah, they're like skipping. On June 28, 4 Air Force officers in Maxwell, Montgomery, they see these bright lights traveling in formation across the sky. And again, they're saying they're kind of zigzagging and skipping,
Yeah.
On June 29th, at the White Sands Proving Grounds in New Mexico, is where they test missiles and stuff like that. These naval rocket experts, Dr. C.J. John and 2 other scientists, they see this silvery disc that they report kind of moving around the place. They said, we noticed a glare in the sky, and we looked up, there was a silver disc whirling along. We watched the thing for nearly 60 seconds, and then it simply disappeared. It didn't go behind a mountain range. 1 minute it was clearly visible, and the next minute it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah. On July the 3rd, an astronomer in Maine saw a UFO about 100 feet in diameter. And then the Air Force sent out a general order saying that any UFOs that were sighted by their crews, they should try and take them down. So then that takes us to July the 4th, to the kind of July the 4th weekend,
Big weekend, 1947.
It's a big weekend, and this is where, like, Kenneth Arnold's sighting in 1947 is a big event, but this is probably the biggest event is Roswell, and that kind of starts to break over the July the 4th kind of weekend. And this is essentially the second big event in 1947. So there was this saucer already for about 6 weeks leading up to it. There's this kind of saucer mania, It's all over the newspapers. Everyone's talking about these flying saucers.
Yeah.
And then on July the 4th, this guy called Mac Brazel walks into a sheriff's office in Roswell, New Mexico.
Somebody going to the police.
Yeah. He walks into a sheriff's office in Roswell, New Mexico, and tells them just an absolutely bonkers story. And then his bonkers story is that this is kind of disputed, but sometime in early June, sometime between the 4th of June and the 16th of June, you'll get different dates depending on where you read about it. But so Mac Brazel anyway works as a foreman on a sheep ranch. And it's a huge sheep ranch. He's out there one day in early June, and he's just checking on the sheep.
Yeah.
And while he's out there, he sees a debris field with loads of silver foil on it and really unusual, loads of stuff that he can't recognize, that he doesn't recognize. There's foil, there's kind of incredibly light struts. He picks up some of this stuff, and he's on horseback, and he brings it home. And then the next day, he goes to visit his neighbors at this sheep ranch. I think they're called the Proctors. He goes to visit the Proctors and asks them, "Have you guys seen anything like this on your land?" And they're like, "No." "Do you know what this is?"
These are the guys.
Huh?
These are the guys.
What guys?
The guys from the ranch. The Skinwalker Ranch.
It's in a different state, I think.
Is it?
Yeah, that's in...
I thought it was those... Okay, never mind.
No, that's in Nevada, right? Or no, Skinwalker Ranch is in Utah.
Oh.
This is in New Mexico.
Sheep farmers.
But I like your style, Yeah, they're...
I thought that was Procter. Anyway, whatever.
Oh no, they have a different name. Oh golly, I can't remember now.
Anyway, sorry.
Oh no, they're the Gormans.
Oh.
And I only remember it because Gorman is my grandmother's name. My grandmother's surname. He brings it around to the proctors.
Okay.
The next day, and says, "Have you guys seen anything like this on your land?" No. Do you know anything about it? No. Did you see anything? No. So they haven't seen anything. He goes home, and then by his own account, he tries to cut and set fire to these pieces, and he can't make any material difference.
I just want to make it burn.
He can't make it burn. So about two to 3 weeks later, his ranch, the ranch he works on, is about 75 miles away from Roswell.
Okay.
So, but they're probably the nearest authorities, as you would say, you know?
Okay.
So he gets in his car and he drives down to Roswell. And he brings some of the material into the sheriff's office. Mm-hmm. And he explains the situation to the sheriff's office. Look, I was out there, I was out there, this is what I found. Here's some of the material. The sheriff dispatches 2 of his deputies with instructions from Brazil on where to find it. Yeah. Dispatches 2 of his deputies. Then he rings... Good
luck!
Yeah. Then he rings the local Air Force base. He rings a guy there... Oh my goodness, in my notes somewhere. Mm-hmm. He meets a guy there called Blanchard, who's the head of the base. Mm. Yeah, so he rings that, and the local base, coincidentally, is the 509th Airborne, and like the 509th at this time in 1947, they're the guys that are in charge of the nuclear weapons. They are, in fact, at this time in the world, the only unit in any military that has operational nuclear weapons.
Wow. So he just rocks it.
Yeah. And I mean, like, one of the things to point out as well, and we'll probably end up talking about this later on, is the kind of connections that people make between UFOs and sites where nuclear activity is taking place. Mm-hmm. Be it bombs or power stations or whatever. Okay. And we'll probably, I can imagine we'll probably end up talking about that eventually. But anyway, these are the guys that are in charge of the bomb. Mm-hmm. And he phones them up. You know, it's a big base. There's like Air Force, there's Army guys, there's lots of different, what do you call them? Divisions of the military base there. Mm-hmm. Branches, I guess you call them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he phones up the guy Blanchard and just says, look, here's the situation. Do you guys have anything secretive out here? Are you testing anything? You know what I mean?
Well, they can't tell.
Like, what do I do about this? And Blanchard says, I don't know, but you know what? I'm going to send some guys over. Yeah? Okay. So he sends over 3 guys. He sends over Jesse Marcel, who becomes a legend in the UFO mythology. Mm-hmm. Jesse Martel, and he sends over 2 other guys. I have it in my notes. Hang on. He sends over 2 other guys. Jesse Marcel, a guy called Army Captain Cavett, and another fella, Master Sergeant Rickett. Yeah? Okay. So, an Air Force guy. Marcel is an intelligence officer at the base. I believe he might even be the intelligence officer at the base. Hmm. So he sends them over, and they interview Brazel, and, get the story from him.
Right.
And then eventually after they interview him for a while, they were like, well, I guess we better have a look at this. So they get into 2 cars. The 2 Army guys, Cavett and Rickett, are in one car. Mm-hmm. Their own personal cars, I believe. And Jesse Marcel with Brazel are in the other car. Yeah. And they travel out to the ranch, and Marcel shows them, or Brazel shows them where the site of all this debris is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Meanwhile, the 2 sheriff's deputies arrive back at Roswell, at the station in Roswell, mm-hmm. and they just couldn't find the site. So the sheriffs have never seen the site. They don't know what it is or where it is. Okay. They've never seen it. Meanwhile, being guided by Brazel, Marcel, Cavett and Rickett all arrive at the site. They have a bit of a look around. Marcel describes it as, there are a number of kind of gashes in the ground, almost like something went down and kind of and hopped up and you know?
Yeah.
Like a skipping stone would. But there's left these gouges in the ground, and the gouges are maybe about 3/4 of a mile long, and 300 feet. I find it so hard to do everything in American measurements, like, but so they're about 3/4 of a mile long. There's a number of distinct kind of skip areas where it came down, skipped, landed again, you know?
Right.
And that either side of it, there's a debris field that's about 300 feet, or 100 meters, if you will, on either side of it. And it's filled with like little bits of this foil, these kind of super light struts, all kinds of weird materials.
Uncommon.
Yeah, uncommon, strange, like even, I mean, like, kind of shiny reflective stuff like aluminum foil or aluminium for our European listeners. Like, that's common now, but like, imagine in 1947, like, you couldn't just buy rolls of that to use in your kitchen, you know?
Wasn't Reynolds wrap invented in 1947?
Is Reynolds wrap foil?
Yeah.
Like tin foil?
Yeah.
Wow.
Hang on. Oh.
So how did you keep... So how did people keep the government out of their thoughts?
Oh my gosh, James, stop! Talking to my phone. When was Reynolds wrap invented?
According to Wikipedia, among other innovations, Reynolds devised a moisture-preserving tobacco tin. Later the switch to aluminum foil was made. In 1947, the company introduced Reynolds Wrap.
Oh
And
my
sold it around
god!
the world. It transformed food storage.
I knew it!
Oh my god!
I knew it! 1947.
So that was the first year that concerned citizens could keep the government out of their thoughts. That is actually, that's quite a coincidence. Although there are no coincidences, are there?
This is just like a really good ad for Reynolds Wrap.
Yeah. So
Not sponsored.
So this is the Roswell thing. They've got the foil everywhere. They're out in the field. One of them is saying this is like Reynolds Wrap. The other one's going, "What's Reynolds Wrap?" And he's trying to explain to him. It's like this
thing, man.
It's this new thing. It's crazy. So they do what any responsible military people would. They put down the back seats in their cars, and they fill up the trunk. That's boots for any European. They fill up the trunk with as much material as they can from the crash site.
Right.
So they've got the trunks of their cars are filled with this foil and these extra light struts and stuff like that. And the two army guys, Cavett and Rickett, drive back first. Marcel puts some extra stuff in his car, and then he drives back and drops off your man Brazel at his house.
Yeah.
And then he drives back to the base. And when he gets to the base, his story is that he went to Blanchard, who's the head of the base that sent them out originally. Mm-hmm. He went to Commander Blanchard and explained the situation, said, yeah, there's definitely a crash site there. There's a number of distinct gouges. We have all this weird material, you know?
Right.
What is it? They have a talk, and then they prepare a statement, a press release, that they release to the newspapers and to a local radio station. Mm-hmm. And the press release states that they are in possession of material from a crashed UFO. Yeah. And that comes out in the newspapers on July the 7th or 8th, I can't remember, 1947. That has an incredible effect on people, you know?
Yeah.
Like, the US Air Force has just said that they've collected materials from a downed UFO.
Right.
What happens then is that the next day, a second press release is prepared, and this press release comes with photographs.
Whoops.
And the photographs are... The press release and the photographs basically state that it was all just a joke. That there was no UFO, and actually it was a crashed weather balloon, And this is where the famous picture of Jesse Marcel holding up the foil from a weather balloon comes from.
It's a good ad for Reynolds Wrap.
It is a brilliant ad for Reynolds Wrap. And I think in terms of that's what happened verifiably in 1947.
Yes.
And that's how the story of Roswell remained, that they had made a statement about a UFO being in possession of materials from a downed UFO, and then the very next day had backtracked and said that actually it was a downed weather balloon. Like, to this very day, if you Google Jesse Marcel, one of the first photos you'll see is the famous photo of him displaying the foil at this press conference. And I don't want to go any further because there's a number of layers to this story, and we'll talk about the next layer of the story.
You've already said too much.
I've already said too much. This is gonna take several things of what's the name of it? Reynolds Wrap?
Reynolds Wrap.
What's the name of the foil? What do you call it?
This is a trap.
Is that what it's called? The tinfoil?
Yeah.
Reynolds Wrap.
Reynolds Wrap is the brand.
Class. Yeah, and we'll talk about what happens next, which is when there's renewed interest in this story, and it happens in the 70s, between the 70s and the 90s, and it takes on the form that we recognize now, you know. So, like, I suppose the important thing to realize here as well is that, like, with most UFO stories, there's always what happens later. You know, there's like a version that happens, and then later it gets retconned or something, you know?
Yeah.
And what we're going to talk about next is the retconning of this. I suppose the interesting thing to note here is that during 1947, or certainly between 46 and 47, the kind of narrative around what this phenomenon in the sky is, like how people view it. Because, like, there's so many times in the 47 stuff when you're reading about it that the objects are moving in formation, you know? Falling like leaves, or fluttering, or fluttering in the sky. But, like, you know, it's so common for them to be in formation and fluttering in the sky. The other thing as well is that now how people view things has changed. Like, now they're from a different planet. They're external to us. You know, they're not one of us.
Yeah. Did they ever think that they were one of it? I mean, well, I guess they thought that maybe it was the military, but...
Yeah, both those cases with the Foo Fighters and the Ghost Rockets, both of them were supposed to be a wartime adversary, you know? Or someone adversarial that are developing this secretly, you know? Yeah. And again, I think, you know, a lot of that kind of comes from wartime mentality anyway. I mean, like, you assume that the other guy is developing terrible, terrible things in secret because you're developing terrible, terrible things in secret, you know? A lot of it is projection, like. But a lot of it is real because they're also developing terrible, terrible things in secret. Because, you know, people are just awful to people. They're just...
Yeah,
you know,
humans are pretty bad.
They're just terrible, terrible people. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today.
All right.
And the next time we will talk in depth about Roswell, and there's
a lot to talk about.
There is an awful lot to talk about, and we will see the reemergence of characters that we've spoken about before.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and giving us another week of spooky stories in the Diamond Painting Deep Dives. Join us next week for another episode. We hope to see you all there. And don't forget to do all the algorithm things. You know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you later. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.